Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Point of Jew. I am your Jew, Jeremy Hirsch, and my guest tonight is Kevin Burr, who hosts a wrestling podcast, Honor Bound, which mostly looks at Ring of Honor, which is it's not quite an independent. Yeah, I know I'm quibbling over the size of wrestling promotions. It's not quite a WWE size wrestling promotion, but it's not like a teeny tiny little regional thing either. And Ring of Honor has been kind of special to both me and Kevin since the early 2000s. So I got a guess that was mostly, there's a lot of people that should enjoy this, and we talk about a lot in wrestling. But, it was something I wanted to do. Haven't really had a lot of the sports conversations as of yet. And I know some of you were snickering and being like, oh, wrestling scripted. Blah. It takes a lot of athleticism. And Kevin, besides hosting this podcast, has also been kind of a wrestling referee in the Mid-Atlantic region. So we get into that a little bit. And then also, this will shock and amaze people because I am an awkward, toe-standing, walking, weird dude. But I used to do professional wrestling. I used to train when I lived in Dayton, Ohio. And just had some fun memories of that. So it was really cool, to be able to talk about that stuff. I felt feeling pretty nostalgic. I don't really have much in the ways of regrets or anything, and I'm happy the way my life turned out. But, a little part of me that's like, I wonder what it would have been like to be, a professional wrestler, because I was lucky enough to be trained by people who worked in WWE, and at the time were going to WWE, having been there previously and then going back. And it was something that I did, when I was up in Ohio for a few years and enjoyed. So it was cool to be able to talk to somebody else about those experiences. So if that's one thing that you take from this episode, even if you're not a big wrestling fan, is there's a lot of fun stories and there's a lot of different things that you can pick up on and, maybe learn a thing or two. We're not going to really go into like favorite matches and like play-by-plays of like suplexes and power bombs and pile drivers or anything like that. And I'm sure we'll talk about people that aren't necessarily like household names and stuff, but there's some cool stories in there to be sure. And, I always try and get, fun guests and things to this is an entertainment podcast. If nothing else, I almost said speech box. My brain is to like 10 years ago, concussions. No, kidding. Point of Jew is a podcast about, different things that are amusing or interesting or, pop culture relevance to me. And then hopefully by proxy of that, entertain you because, I obviously, as much as I love hearing myself talk and should be obvious that I do, I just want to do something that entertains everybody. So, speaking to Kevin for a little bit, and good God, we could have had a conversation probably for like 6 hours. I'm not even like kidding or not speaking in hyperbole. We could have talked forever. So that's why I cut it when I do, because, we could just, BS and swap stories, forever. So it's something I really enjoyed. So without bolstering it up, but so much, there's a better introduction for Kevin on the way. Trust me. Here's this week's episode of Point of Jew. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Point of Jew. Now coming on the podcast, hailing from Chesterfield, Virginia, one half of the Honor Bound ROH podcast, former, sometimes current wrestling referee of Chikara, Nova Pro, VCW, NWA Fusion, Kevin Burr. How was
that was a heck of an introduction. Thanks. It's more than I probably warrant, but yeah.
I mean, thematically speaking, I felt it appropriate. I was going to go for more of a road dog type intro for a second, but I didn't think that the cadence and the verbiage would really flow with that whole spiel.
Mm-hmm. No, you're good, man. Happy to be here.
Well,
You
deserve top billing. You deserve to go over on this podcast.
I don't know, man. I haven't actually been the guest on a podcast maybe ever. So this is exciting on a number of levels, I suppose.
I am glad that I could pop the appearance cherry.
All right.
He has till 5 to recover. It's all right. So, obviously I graciously mentioned the podcast and the refereeing history, but one way or the other, obviously, you've been involved in wrestling for a long time now, starting out obviously as a referee. How did you get involved in wrestling? Like, obviously you liked it growing up, but how did you actually get into it?
Sure. So my path was a little bit less traditional. So I started off. All right. Well, I guess let me get into the whole backstory. So I will get into kind of how I got in. Well, not how I got into wrestling, but the fact that I was into wrestling back in the late 90s, early 2000s, basically when ECW was bought out by Vince. I was pretty much done with wrestling for the most part until Ring of Honor came along, really, and they started kind of garnering some support and fanfare. And yeah, that basically was what really kind of revitalized my interest in wrestling, and it kind of also tuned me into the fact that there was like indie wrestling around. So I kind of started getting around to local promotions, namely at the time it was NWA Virginia, and that was probably in like 2005. So there was a good, actually it was probably closer to like 2003, 2004 maybe, when I really started getting into it.
It's a little bit.
But yeah, NWA Virginia was a local promotion. They ran a few shows down in like downtown Richmond. Generally speaking, not in like the best neighborhoods. They were running in like community centers in sort of impoverished neighborhoods and whatnot. And, that was, perfectly fine by me. And I think it's great that, they gave some of these kids an outreach opportunity and, a cheap live entertainment opportunity. That was something really cool as well.
You also got to run where you can, right?
Yeah, exactly. And well, I don't know if that was an intentional move by the guy that was running it at the time. His name is Rick O'Brien. We'll get back to him later for sure. But so he used to be a elementary school, maybe he was. I don't know exactly what grade he taught, but he was, I think it was actually high school, but he was administrative. He was also a teacher. And he had originally ran NWA Upstate, which was in upstate New York. I believe it was NWA Upstate. It was either Upstate or NWA New York. Either way, it was in New York. I think it was upstate New York. In any case, he moved down to the Richmond area and effectively branded NWA Virginia. And because I think he had ties to the education side, he wanted to try and do more like youth outreach and things of that nature. So anyway, as a result of all that, I kind of started getting heavily more into local wrestling. A friend of mine that I actually went to school with, and so I was going to ECPI. My shoot job is in IT. So I met a guy who was running a camera for Rick O'Brien in NWA Virginia. And for whatever reason, he couldn't make a show, and he knew that I was into wrestling. So he was like, hey, I can't record this show. You want to go ahead and just do it? So, I did, and I was completely out of my element because I was like, I don't know, I was 24, but I guess in a lot of ways, I've always been a little bit of a late bloomer. I didn't jump into college originally, and I've always been really timid and not really socially outgoing, which is maybe a little bit weird if you actually get to know me to think that I'm not super socially outgoing. But yeah, it was interesting because like I didn't want to be near ringside. I was on the other side of the barricade. I was not comfortable at all running camera. It was very awkward for me.
But intimidated?
Very, yeah. Because I mean, it was the first indie show I think I'd really ever been to either. So it was like, a little bit more backstory there. So I've been a fan of wrestling for quite a long time. And actually, and I don't know if my dad's actually going to listen to this, but my dad also was a wrestling fan. And as he got older, he didn't want to admit that he was still a fan of wrestling.
Oh, that
So
happens.
he didn't take me to any wrestling events or anything. The first live wrestling event was the first ECW TV taping at the Siegel Center, downtown Richmond, the VCU basketball facility. So that was 1999. October of 1999 was the first wrestling show that I ever went to live. So yeah, I was 19. I'm old, by the way. I'm very old.
You are not very old, because then that doesn't speak highly of me. So I can't have that.
So, any case, after all that, I started kind of going to a lot more of the shows. The same guy that I was friends with at ECPI, we started a local wrestling message board. We had a lot of the local guys that were kind of. This was back probably like 2004, 2005, and we had a lot of the guys that were working for NWA Virginia and VCW, things of that nature, like and Point South as well. There's promotions in North Carolina like CWF Mid Atlantic, but yeah, we had those wrestlers, promoters, etc. coming to our message board, and we were kind of talking about wrestling with them. And eventually kind of the other two guys that I was working on that site with and that message board with, their interest sort of started to wane. And I still was very into it. Me and another guy that was actually on the message board kind of sort of took it over a little bit. Then he moved to North Dakota.
Oh, wow.
To teach on an Indian reservation for some reason.
That's cool. Also, we're dating ourselves, because for those who don't know, message boards were absolutely huge in like early 2000s, especially for wrestling fans to like just interact with each other, interact with any talent that was out there that was willing to interact. So if nothing else, that's dating us.
So yeah, basically eventually one thing led to another. I got to be decent friends with some of the wrestlers, and one wrestler in particular, Sean Denny, who he worked very frequently with NWA Virginia, VCW, a lot of other promotions. Basically, he and I were kind of just chatting on AOL Instant Messenger one night, and he had asked, he was like, you go to so many of these shows. Have you ever like just wanted to be a wrestler? Because like you could do that. And I was like, no, I don't know if I really have like the desire. Because at the time, I fast forward a little bit, because by the time this conversation happened, it was actually 2010.
Oh, wow. That jumps a little bit.
Yeah. So in that span of time, I actually had, I thought about doing refereeing before, and I was trying to parlay some of the web design and like message board tech skills. There was a local promotion that I think it was called South Atlantic Wrestling. I think it eventually turned into whatever became Ground Zero here locally. But yeah, that I tried to basically trade training for a website, and they went for it, but their thought was, we train everybody to be a wrestler, which I'm not saying that's a bad take, but for me at age 30, not super athletic, it wasn't something that really kind of inspired me to continue my end of that bargain.
It's rough on you most days. I would, for those that don't know, I did wrestling in Ohio in the early 2000s, probably 2003, 2004. And yeah, I'm bad with timelines. So I was like, what, 2021? So I could and I'm not any kind of like great athlete, never was, but the bumps and bruises and things. The ring is not like a springy trampoline. I don't know who in the face of the earth thinks falling on basically like plywood is just great. And I don't know if it's the same everywhere, but the ropes are basically cabling with like electrical tape around it. So those aren't like super springy and fun to run into either. So I would imagine at 30, that's not the greatest thing for you.
No, it really wasn't what I was really looking at. And well, I wasn't quite 30 at the time. At that point, I was probably more like 27, 28. So fast forward back to the conversation with Sean Denny. Basically, I was like, yeah, I don't know. I was talking to some folks before, I kind of tried it out, and they wanted me to do all of the traditional wrestler training, and, it just didn't really work out. Plus, some other people were like, oh, I'm about 6 feet tall, so they don't really want tall referees. That was the explanation that I got from some people at the time when I was kind of trying to get in just kind of from the side angle. Well, his response to that was like, screw it. If you want to be a referee, I'll train you. So ultimately, he was working for NWA Virginia. Actually, at that time, NWA Virginia, Rick O'Brien had decided he was going to get out of wrestling at that point. He ended up selling NWA Virginia to 3 people. Ultimately, it was Larry Horsley, Preston Quinn, and Mark Bravura. And basically all 3 of those turned it into NWA Fusion, which is where I cut my teeth. So originally it turned out, and this is where our world's going to get smaller.
We have quite the intersects.
We're getting close though. So at that point, Sean basically was like, come to the Fusion shows early. We'll work out ahead of time. We'll run through some stuff. And, anyway, he ended up actually getting me booked on a show in North Carolina, like with no training, no nothing. They were like, hey man, there's this show in, like, I can't remember the town in North Carolina, but it was a good 3-hour drive from my house. I was informed of the show like 4 days before it happened. He was like, yeah man, I got you booked. There's another ref that's going to be there. It'll be great. You'll learn on the fly. No better way to learn than just being tossed into the deep end. And long story short, there was no other referee. I reffed the entire show, top to bottom, with zero just what my instinctual refereeing was. And it was fine in the respect that there were probably only about 15 paid, so in attendance. But yeah, it was not exactly my best refereeing work to date. No, not hardly.
It was a way to get involved. It was a way to learn on the fly as they push you into the deep end. So hey, I'm sure the 15 there were none the wiser. So you did all right.
Oh yeah. No, they probably figured something out. But
they want to boo the refs anyway. They hate the refs. Come on.
Sure. Yes. But yeah. So anyway, as time went on, I did actually do more training at NWA Fusion. We would just work out before the shows. There actually even started kind of be a little bit of a training class, and there was another guy from the Richmond area, a guy named Jeff Early.
That's where the connection is.
Yes. So he and I, because we're both from the Richmond area, we started carpooling to the shows. So we both started getting there early, and he started working with me early, because he would get there with me instead of like us waiting for Sean to get there. He'd start working with me there. And, we also worked with some folks with Ground Zero, a guy named Chris Shark, who actually is a referee for NXT UK at this point. So, I've made some pretty good connections over the years in that respect. Chris is a great guy.
It is really a small world. I will, because this is about you, I will condense the living daylights out of this to just get to this point. So as I mentioned earlier, 2003, 2004, probably 02, 03, a friend of mine was going to GMU in Northern Virginia, and one of his friends was dating a guy who was a wrestler in New Jersey. The guy's name, I don't remember his actual name, but he was wrestling for Ring of Honor. His name was Dixie. He was in a group they had called Special K.
Mm-hmm.
And Dixie, talked to me and gave me some advice in getting into wrestling, but didn't really know anybody. I was living in Dayton, Ohio at the time. Mm-hmm. And ROH was running pretty frequently at the Montgomery Fairgrounds up there near my house. So I would get to see, indie wrestling all the time. And that was my first kind of like glimpse into, something that wasn't WWE or WCW or even ECW, and just kind of like fell in love with it. And then fast forwarding a little bit, there was an ad for like a 2-month stint kind of wrestle camp basically. And if they liked you, you could stay and actually train at Heartland Wrestling, which was at one point in time kind of like a developmental league for WWE. Yep. And their facility was in Cincinnati, and it had like old pay-per-view banners, and just, you obviously could tell that they had some kind of connection to WWE at some point because they had all this old stuff from there. And the person running this camp was Jimmy Yang, and Jimmy Yang lived in Kentucky. Jimmy had wrestled for WCW and WWE, and I got to learn from Jimmy for a little bit. The class was like, I don't know, 8-9 guys that eventually like whittled down to like, I think 3 or maybe 4 guys towards the end of it. But Jimmy liked what the final guys were doing, and wanted us to stay and train at HWA. It was supposed to basically be with him, but the head trainer at HWA is Cody Hawk, who is an amazing guy. So we stayed, trained with them a little bit. A lot of guys who wrestled in Heartland Wrestling would come through and help train us periodically. I got to break my wrist to pat myself on the back at least once. I did get to my friend Brett came to visit me once, and they knew that, I had a friend watching us train. John Moxley was there. Yep. And I got to John let me wrestle him. He said, just go as long as you can and just follow what I'm doing. And John and I literally it wasn't a match. Nobody was there, but because it's just the guy's training. But I got to wrestle Moxley for, I don't know, 30, 45 minutes. It felt like a lifetime. And I couldn't, like I'm not, like I said, I'm not like I'm an amazing athlete or anything. So the cardio is not there whatsoever. But I had a lot of cool experiences doing that. And then just to fast forward to, get to your point, I had to, because I was a college kid. I was living at home. My parents were moving back to Virginia from Ohio because of my dad's job at the time. And Jimmy was like, oh, I know somebody in Virginia. You could train with her. And I know you will disagree with this philosophy. And I know Jeff has disagreed with it before. But something that stuck with me, and I know he didn't say it to be disparaging or to be bad or anything. I'm just saying it, prefacing with this. He said, I want you to train with somebody who's been to the show. Why would you have somebody train you who's never been there, essentially? There's a lot of good hands, there's a lot of good people, but trying to stick with training with people who kind of know what to expect from WWE, if that was the ultimate goal for me to get there. So he was like, I'll hook you up with Mickey James, because Mickey lives, in the Richmond area. Shout out to Mickey. You have no idea who I am, but we interact sometimes on Twitter. So get on this podcast. But I don't think whatever wires were crossed or what have you, I don't think she ever, maybe he did text her. Maybe she was just busy. Whatever. I moved to Richmond. I was in college at VCU and met in some of my classes Jeff Early, who I heard talking about wrestling and who did try, and maybe I should have taken him up on it. Maybe I'm an idiot, which is always possible. He did want me to go to, I don't remember at the time it was VCW or NWA Fusion where he wanted me to go, but he wanted me to train with him there. So I could have intersected with you
a
decade before. Actually.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I fully expect our paths would have crossed. But yeah, did your audio cut out?
It did not.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It's okay. The show's all about snafus and learning and overcoming.
Cool. So I guess let me go ahead and just kind of condense my career here real fast, if we want to call it a career. But okay. from about 2010 until about 2013, I pretty much exclusively worked NWA Fusion. Fusion ran at a point almost twice a month. So I was fairly busy just working for Fusion. 2013, my son was born. So in around April of 2013, the big show of the year for NWA Fusion was a show called Shanghai Showdown. The show was in a town that was really close to some place on the map called Shanghai, Virginia.
Oh,
so they ran with it. But yeah, that was their quote unquote WrestleMania show. So I figured, this is going to be my last show with Fusion, at least for a little while. There was some political stuff going on within the promotion at the time too, so I kind of needed a break from Fusion. But anyway, my kid was about to be born. I wanted to make sure I was focused on that, so I took some time off from wrestling in around 2013. So I refed for roughly 3 years exclusively with NWA Fusion before I ultimately retired the first time. So then.
As is custom in wrestling.
The Terry Funk syndrome. So later in 2013, actually, NWA Fusion was running a show in Mechanicsville. They had Shane Helms on the show, among others. There were some Chikara guys as well that were on that show. Because of the Chikara guys on the show specifically, and the fact that it was in Mechanicsville, I reached out to Mark Rivera and I was like, hey man, I know I haven't refed in like 6 months, but this is like 30 minutes from my house. Mind giving me a couple matches? And he did. I ended up reffing half of that show. I ended up working with Ophidian and doing a really stupid dance in the ring while I was hypnotized. But yeah, that was basically one and done for me for the rest of 2013. I kind of got the itch back after that anyway. Reached out to some people. VCW were short on refs at the time. Traditionally they run in Norfolk, Virginia. They just happened to be running a benefit show for a guy named Brandon Scott, who he lives out near Harrisonburg, that area, and he's also a longtime guy for VCW. Really nice dude. His uncle had cancer, and they were doing like a fundraising benefit type show for his uncle out near Harrisonburg, and they needed a referee. There were apparently issues finding somebody else at the time, so as seems somewhat customary, I ended up reffing the entire show. Unpaid because it was a benefit show. But I was just kind of happy to kind of get my feet back in there a little bit, and it was a way to sort of foster that relationship with VCW at the time. So past that, I was like, look, you guys want me on any of your shows, I'm available, we'll do that. So that was probably about 2014. I was more or less exclusively working for VCW for about a year. Nova Pro came into the picture, I think it was late 2014. And as of early 2015, I could be wrong on the dates here. I could be completely screwing things up. But then when Nova Pro came around, and again, I think this was 2015 when they actually firmly got off the ground. I started with them, and I was basically just doing nothing but Nova Pro and VCW at that point. Now, there were some other stints in there as well where I'd kind of gotten to know Bryce Remsburg a little bit. Bryce Remsburg is an official a referee who used to work for Chikara and is currently one of the officials working for AEW. And this was also, I think, around the 2014 timeframe. Bryce had put some stuff out there on Facebook about doing like a virtual seminar type thing where you would pay like $30 and he would watch a match that you've refereed, go over it with you, give you any pointers, etc. And we did that. Bryce still remembers me to this day, so he hasn't gotten to head in the clouds stardom or whatever at this point, as far as I can tell anyway. But no, Bryce is an awesome guy. But I also happen to be friends with some folks who also worked at VCW and Chikara, they worked at NWA Fusion. There are a few people from the Richmond area who have worked for Chikara. A guy named Lucas Calhoun, who he doesn't work as Lucas Calhoun anymore. I don't know exactly what he works as, but he was also the guy who was responsible for Richmond Lucha Libre.
Oh, that's why I know the name.
Yep. His real name is Chris. I don't want to go too shoot because I don't know what his new gimmick is, but he was the artist formerly known as Lucas Calhoun. We'll call him that from this point forward, or Chris, whatever. No, anyway, I've known Chris for a long time because he was working for he was doing Richmond Lucha. He was doing NWA Virginia. Like, he and I go back a little bit. I wouldn't say we're like great friends or anything, but I've known him for, gosh, at least 15 years at this point. He actually was our wedding photographer. I mean,
oh wow,
he's a commercial photographer for a living, so I figured, go to a friend who actually knows what he's doing, and maybe he'll cut you a deal because you've planned a wedding before.
Yes,
so
I did much the same. I bogarted one of my friends who's a professional photographer for the wedding to get a deal.
But yeah, anyway, so the first show, it was I actually had contacted Chris because he I think he was actually running he was helping Chikara get a show in Richmond. They ran at the Greater Richmond Convention Center downtown.
Did not know they ever came here. Wow.
Yeah, they did. It was just the once. It was apparently super expensive, and it was somewhat lightly attended. So that was basically that. It was one of those deals where, they wanted to try to find a local ref because they, wouldn't have to pay to get another person licensed or anything like that. So in the state of Virginia, wrestlers are required to have a license through the Department of Occupation and Regulation. Department of Professional Occupation and Regulations, DPOR. So they've got a whole board dedicated to pro wrestling, boxing, MMA. For whatever reason, pro wrestling is still lumped in as a legitimate sport, even though Vince ripped that Band-Aid off like 20 years ago. 30 years ago. Any case, I reached out to Chris. I was like, hey, I'm already licensed. If they need somebody, I'm here. He was actually pulling a lot of weight on getting that the building and all of the paperwork and everything, because he'd run shows with Richmond Lucha, and he was helping Chikara get all the licensing stuff done, because there's a lot of administrative nonsense required when you're booking a show in the state of Virginia. So he was really doing a lot of the kind of office work for that show, because he had already had a lot of relationships with DPOR and whatnot from running Richmond Lucha. So anyway, because he was kind of pulling some weight, I guess, in some respect on that show, I don't know if he put in a word or said, hey, I got a ref. Either way, I refed I think it was maybe 2 or 3 matches on that show. And, at that point, I had already kind of had a relationship with Bryce. So ultimately, every time they came back to Virginia from that point, which was 2 times after that, I got to ref for Chikara. So
That's really cool.
I also ref for Chikara a couple of times in North Carolina. They one of them was part of a weekend of shows. One was Norfolk, one was North Carolina. I actually did 2 of those trips, but the first time I was support staff. I was just sort of working security the first night. And then the second night, it was, I think, the Norfolk show, if memory serves correct. And then the second time, I worked both the North Carolina show and the Norfolk show. And then the third time I was down in North Carolina with Chikara, there was a double header, and I worked both the afternoon and the evening show. So that was the last 2 times I was.
Exhausting day, man. Just the travel alone usually knocks you down.
Yeah, it sucks. Because I mean, as with the one thing I'll say about Chikara that was great is they were very professional about how they attempted to be very professional as far as an indie can about making sure people were like accountable for being at the building on time. So call time was traditionally always like 3 hours before bell time to make sure that everybody was in the building with no issues early as possible. So that was a little rough because, of course, their first show happened, I think, at like noon or 1 o'clock. So I had to be there at like 10. So we had to leave Richmond at like 6:30, 7 a.m.
God, it's a long.
It was a little rough, but yeah. But yeah, you know, as is customary with professional wrestling, we turned it into a carpool road trip situation. So my drive wasn't even the longest in the car. So yeah.
No, and traveling long distances and having fun car trips is absolutely a signature of being in wrestling. And it's one thing, not that I don't or whatever, but I never loved sitting in the car forever, so I don't miss that.
Yeah.
And when I was in Ohio, the only place that luckily we got to go to places that were close by, since there was a lot of different venues in Ohio for wrestling. But we went to Kentucky once, and I don't mean like Louisville or something like that. I mean way out in Kentucky. And yeah, those types of drives are not things I miss, but that's still cool, and that's still a really good experience. So was that like the wrap up point of your reffing career, or you still have a little bit to go?
Not exactly. So yeah, so Chikara was sort of just a once in a while type thing. I mostly reffed regularly for, again, it was VCW, Nova Pro. Then there was a promotion called Classic Pro Wrestling, who they were fine. They were just kind of they were kind of close to home. They had shows less than an hour from the house, so they were really easy. They paid pretty well, at least initially. I don't want to necessarily get into that too much, but the short version on that front, though, is I think the promoter had a lot of money, and then realized that the expenses were outweighing the expenditure was outweighing the income. So
I mean,
they had to, I think, scale back after going a little, maybe too all out on some of the early shows. But no, I mean, even still, like the guys that were running it were nice enough. Yeah, it was a fun experience though. And I always appreciated getting home before like 11 after a wrestling show. That was fun. So
quick turnaround, and they were good on paying you, because that's another thing in wrestling.
Oh, yeah.
Promoters don't always pay when they're supposed to.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't want to get necessarily into too much of the meat and potatoes, but I was traditionally paid fairly, relatively speaking. I made roughly the same amount everywhere I went. So I mean, I guess that's market price or whatever. So, but yeah, anyway, towards the end of 2017 is when I basically stopped altogether. I guess VCW decided they were going to stop using me at a point. I think that part of it was because Classic Pro had a lot of the same dates as VCW did. I also kind of had some disagreements with somebody there at one point, so I think they were just like, let's just cut that cord. Then Nova Pro also, for some reason, and this kind of came out of left field to me, decided they didn't want to use me anymore. I don't know exactly what the deal was with that. They never really were forthcoming about exactly why, but we
Stepping
can
on some toes.
I don't know, man. I think it's funny because like nobody's perfect, and I am certainly not. But like, of all of the places that I have blown finishes or blown spots in pro wrestling, Nova Pro wasn't really one of them. But so it was weird because I think there were a couple of maybe occasions that that something weird happened, and I guess a couple was too many for that guy. I also have a theory that, and I don't know if he'll ever listen to this, so I don't really give a shit. But the guy that was running Nova Pro is kind of, well, Nova Pro is not around any longer. I'll go ahead and put it that way. They apparently had a problem with paying some of their talents, either on time or at all, as you alluded to earlier. One thing led to another with Nova Pro. Guy named Ethan Page.
Oh, I know.
Got very vocal on Twitter about it, about how he wasn't paying people, and then people started actually like, echoing the sentiment, and then word kind of got out enough to where he was having problem getting guys, and so ultimately Nova Pro closed up shop, and this was probably, I can't remember if it was late 2018. I guess it was sometime in 2018, maybe early 2019. But yeah, they were pretty much done if not less than a year, a little more than a year after I stopped working there. So part of the theory I have on that is that they were spending too much money on talent. And by talent, I mean non-referees and non-ring announcers and support staff, so to speak. So they were trying to cut corners in other areas. Plus, at that time, I mentioned before, I was friends with a guy named Chris Sharp, who is admittedly much better referee than I am, and was back in the U.S. He was living abroad in the UK. He came back to the U.S. for a little while to referee, or not to referee, but so there was he was waiting for citizenship stuff to work its way out in the UK because his wife, who is a UK citizen, they were trying to make sure all the citizenship stuff was worked out. So he was kind of here for a period of time while waiting for all of that paperwork and whatnot to process. So in any case, he started working there at roughly around the same time. I figure they were like, well, if we can get a better ref for the same price, let's do that. And then they also brought in a guy named Stefan Smith, who he actually is a referee now in NXT Florida. So, they definitely had talented referees. I'm not bitter about getting like replaced by guys who admittedly are better than me.
Right.
I think it's just the circumstances in which I was let go was a little bit annoying, because they basically were just like, yeah, we're not going to use you going forward, so later.
And it's the not knowing sometimes that can be frustrating too.
Yeah, and it's
not being upfront.
Yeah, and then it was just like, oh, you're still welcome to come and help out at the shows, and I'm just like, well,
why would you?
Well, if I'm gonna not fucking referee, why? Yeah, exactly. Why would I? So, so anyway, yeah, that was that. And because VCW wasn't using me at that point anymore, the only thing I was working at was Classic Pro, and because of DPOR, this all happened in December of 2017. So it was either December of 2017 or January of 2018. The way that DPR works is the licenses that you get through them are a calendar year starting at January. So if you get a wrestling license in April, it's valid until December of that same year. So anyway, every January, December, it's always this like surge of like every wrestler and referee that work in the state of Virginia is trying to get their paperwork in and all that. And I was habitually late at getting in my paperwork. I always got it in before I ref the first show of the year, but except for once, but that I got it in on time, but that it had not processed on time. So anyway, but so yeah, I was already waffling on when I was gonna renew the thing. Nova Pro, who was effectively my number one priority at that time, didn't want to use me anymore. So I was basically just like, well, I'm done. It totally deflated me. So I just sort of called it quits after that, and just didn't renew my license for the coming year. Classic Pro was the only promotion I was working for. Anyway, at that time, I didn't feel like scrambling for bookings or anything, so I just figured I would call it a day. But that also was sort of short-lived, as in February of this year, I actually worked a show for Fusion Wrestling, which is formerly NWA Fusion. Larry Horsley, who was one of the promoters, he moved to Ohio or something, sold his stake in the company. They had lost the NWA affiliation before he moved, but everybody lost NWA affiliation because NWA dissolved. So before it came back like last year with Billy Corgan, but that's anyway. I'm just trying to not tangent too much. Yeah.
Yes, the guy who was in Smashing Pumpkins owns National Wrestling Alliance.
Yep. That's a crazy, and that wasn't even in 2020. That was like just the crazy wrestling world, not.
We can go on a lot of splinter tangents just from everything that happens in the world of wrestling.
Oh, sure.
But yeah.
So yeah, I worked that show in February, and I got licensed again in February, thinking I could referee all year if I wanted to. And yeah, there hasn't been another show in Virginia, as far as I'm aware, at least not a legitimate show in the state of Virginia, as far as I'm aware, all year. So
thanks, 2020.
Yeah, man, it's good times.
But you're still filling that void, so you still had that kind of hankering to do something wrestling related. Yep. So recently, is that what kind of spurned it? You had this time on your hands, you have this wrestling shaped hole in your heart, and you need to fill it with something wrestling related. So you have the Honor Bound podcast where you talk ROH, right?
Yeah. So that is a lot of it. Yeah. So a little bit more backstory then, to get to that point. Back when I was running the message board, and before I'd actually gotten into the refereeing, the message board actually was entitled The Airplane Spin.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I was a big Bryan Danielson mark.
I think a lot of people following the indies at that point in time had to have been.
So yeah, anyway, my friend Tim and I, we actually met through indie wrestling, of course. And yeah, that we had done some podcasting as a result of the Airplane Spin. We'd actually, I can't remember exactly when we started doing it. I think it might've been like 2007 or 2008. Tim and I had done some podcasting, and we were just doing roughly the same thing we're doing now, but just maybe in a little bit more of a long form type conversation. And it wasn't, I think it was bi-weekly. I can't really remember the specifics because it's been, like over 10 years at this point, which is insane. But yeah, we actually recorded a bunch of podcasts. Tim and I have actually been out to LA twice. There was a there was a convention out in LA a few times called Wrestle Reunion. The High Spots, Bill Apter, they were responsible for it. We went out both times, in part because there was there were 2 wrestling shows attached to it each year. There was a Ring of Honor show and a PWG show attached to it each year. So we went out there a couple of times. We also had went to I can't remember if we went to at least one Ring of Honor show up in Philly. We went to the first Dragon Gate USA show up in Philly. So, I mean, we Ring of Honor has definitely been a part of our, like, DNA, I guess, for the better part of the last 20 years. So I think ultimately when it came time to reboot their TV show, or because they were really so their TV show remained on the air, but they weren't showing any live, or rather new material, because they had stopped taping everything as of like February or March. So when Ring of Honor had announced they were going to start taping new episodes, and they were bringing back the Pure title, and they were doing a tournament to crown that on the TV. Tim basically sent me a message, and he was like, "Hey man, I'm not really interested in much wrestling anymore. This might be like the last hope for me. Would you want to do a podcast with me on it?" And I was like, "Absolutely, I'm going to watch it anyway." So, so that's basically how that came about. Tim just sort of reached out to me, not necessarily out of the blue, but yeah, he was thinking about our old podcast, how we were talking about Ring of Honor and whatnot anyway. So
is it?
Yeah.
You guys obviously still. I mean, the company holds a special place in your hearts.
Yeah. But we're realists.
What was that?
But we are realists.
I haven't honestly been able to, and it's somewhat true of all wrestling. I mean, I really, really do enjoy NXT on most times that I see it. But overall, I mean, I don't watch Raw or SmackDown as much as I used to, even necessarily like a year ago. And then ROH, I probably fell out of following thoroughly. Goodness, the last time I was really following it, I think, Seth Rollins was still Tyler Black, and there was like the Age of the Fall with like Jimmy Jacobs
and Brody Lee.
Yeah. So having gotten into it, when they were starting out like I did, and having seen kind of the evolution, they get pillaged a lot because they do a really good job of developing talent. A lot of people really, I mean, CM Punk, Samoa Joe, AJ Styles, Bryan Danielson, Brody Lee, Seth Rollins. Yeah. I mean, you could name literally, I could probably come across 100 names with you who've really just got plucked, whether it was WWE or Impact, TNA, whatever the hell you want to call it. Is it harder to watch?
And now AEW, yeah.
Well, I'm sorry?
And now AEW, yeah.
Yeah. Is it harder to watch it now just because I don't want to say there's not as much talent out there anymore, because there's just a lot of options where people are being smart. Yeah. And I don't necessarily I feel like ROH maybe needs like some kind of third coming at this point, because to me, I mean, Jay Lethal's wonderful to watch, but like there's nobody really pulling me in to watch over there. Maybe I'm just missing out, which is entirely possible too. Maybe there's somebody that Marty Scurll's gone now for. We'll touch on that in a minute, I promise.
Sure.
But he was super engaging. But like there's nobody that's calling me to watch Ring of Honor, and I would love to watch Ring of Honor again.
Yeah, and you're making a lot of valid points, and that's why I say that we're realists about it, because at this point, Ring of Honor is. I think to me, Ring of Honor went through a few different iterations, right?
Yeah.
Because there was the Gabe Sapolsky era where, it was pure wrestling. It was the emphasis, right? Then there was the HDNet era, and then there was, the Sinclair era, which we are in currently, right? So, and through all of these different eras, there have been different circumstances in the wrestling landscape. For instance, like when Ring of Honor first started, the WWE was failing at putting any of these ROH guys over.
Oh, 100%.
With the exception of CM Punk, but that was still later on. That wasn't like an immediate thing. So, but I mean, guys like Low-Ki, and I can't even think of anybody else that ROH lost to the WWE around that time, right?
You could maybe argue to a smaller extent, even though they had nice tag team title runs, London and Kendrick.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Kendrick at the time known as Spanky.
Spanky. I have a true story upstairs, and I almost wore it. I have one of these ROH like bright ass green and pink high voltage shirts. I freaking
Electric Six, baby.
Yeah, dude. I loved Spanky. Was one of my favorites. I loved him, and I knew he was never going to be like WWE champion or something like that. But I thought he could have had better singles runs than he did.
Yeah, well, he became a WWE champion, cruiser.
Oh, cruiserweight, yeah. But how much is that saying? I do want to. This randomly popped up. One of my favorite wrestling stories from when I was training involves Paul London, so I do actually want to.
Oh, dude, that does not surprise me. Paul London worked for VCW of at least a handful of shows. I wasn't on any of those shows, but one of my best friends is one of the is the primary ring announcer for VCW, and he has Paul London stories. So
everyone I think that's ever met this man has Paul London stories. I met him once. I think it was about, again, I'm really shitty with timelines, so I apologize. Jimmy got let go at one point by WWE, and that's why he started doing that program. Mm-hmm. And then I think he got re-signed because he was going to come back as, the cowboy Jimmy Yang.
Yeah, and Yang actually did some time in ROH.
Yes, he did. I was training under him when he was in ROH.
Right, yeah, that makes sense.
I got to go to an ROH show and set up the ring, and he would not remember this story, but different. Again, we just jump all over the place. Matt Sydal, I would run into at every ROH show when just as a fan. He didn't understand why he recognized me and thought just from wrestling, from just like, oh, he's a wrestler. Mm-hmm. And he hugged me. And I just want to say that he was super friendly, and I actually always remember that. Like, it felt like, yeah, we ran into each other like 101 times, and he just couldn't place it where, but he was like very, very friendly and like super just nice. And he critiqued, like we did like it wasn't a match, but I was like screwing around with one of the other guys in the training class at ROH, mm-hmm. and Matt was nice and just gave some pointers and stuff. But my Paul London story is, this is about the time Jimmy was about to go back to WWE. There was SmackDown at Cincinnati in the US Bank Arena, I think it was. And we had to go we were supposed to pick up Paul London, JBL, and Layla. JBL was not, I guess he took his own car or I don't know. I mean, he was, I think at that point, main event status with his singles run. We tried to take Layla's bags to her car, and she wouldn't have it. She was super nice and friendly because she's like, listen, I'm the same as you guys, same, I'm training and learning, same as you. I don't want any special treatment. So she was really cool with that. We got in the car. Paul was super friendly, very talkative. But just at a random-ass juncture, he just turns to the back seat where me and one of the other trainees was sitting. He's like, I will fucking kill you. With, like, this roaring intensity. And then he's like, just fucking with you.
That tracks. That sounds like the Paul London I've heard of.
And then we randomly talked about, like, I think he worked at Best Buy or something at some point. But he was he's very friendly and approachable, but he just does really weird, random. I don't know. Dude is very interesting. Very interesting.
When he came out to the ring in PWG in like an astronaut uniform, that was very, very true to his personality. He is from freaking outer space. I'm pretty sure.
He is out there. He is cool dude. I mean, he was super friendly with
Oh
us
yeah,
the rest of the car ride, but just that whole turning around unexpectedly with like a wild, like gone look. I'm like, I somewhat believed him at the time.
I that tracks, man. Like I said, man, that is a traditional Paul London story.
I'm glad I could work my stories in and feel my nostalgia. So if nothing else, that's why I'm thrilled that I could talk to you, because I have no one
Yeah.
else to go off these tangents and stories with. Let's get back to you, because talking about where we were with like Ring of Honor, and what you're seeing with the product now.
Oh, sure, yeah. So again, I think because of how everything has kind of panned out in the wrestling world, Ring of Honor, I think they used to, eh, maybe within the past like 3 or 4 years, I think that they kind of felt like they were able to compete with a TNA or Impact or whatever, and I think for that reason they felt like they were a bit more big league than they ever have been. Um, and I think that's why if you go in to ROH at this point, again, as like a realist,
Yeah.
you're not really looking at it as this place where you're going to have the mega stars and the most popular wrestlers in the world. So I think you've got still really good talent. You've got guys who I think are either on the upswing of their career or really just sort of trying to kind of cut their teeth a little bit, or are rebounding in some way and trying to reestablish their careers, like guys like EC3 or PJ Black for that matter.
Or Justin Gabriel.
That's PJ Black, yes.
Yes. No, just
Okay, sorry, yeah.
I don't know if anyone's gonna remember him from like Nexus.
Sorry. I thought you were trying to add a separate wrestler, not just being like.
No. Just
I figured you out now, but
he's been PJ Black for years now, so I'm assuming if anybody's following like this for the wrestling aspect,
yeah.
He is, but
former Nexus whatever Justin Gabriel. He's PJ Black. It looks totally different. I'm not totally sold on him as a Ring of Honor wrestler, but that's neither here nor there. I'm sure he's a very nice guy. But yeah, it's. I think Ring of Honor right now, and I think the time off especially has kind of helped them kind of reevaluate, reassess what their place is in wrestling, because the pure title tournament, I'll be honest, has been really solid. They've presented themselves as a more of a traditional sports type product, right? And the presentation has shown that. Now, admittedly, because they taped 8 weeks of nothing but pure title tournament, it's getting a little bit stale now, just a little bit. Like I kind of would like to see something other than pure title matches. But given what they were dealing with at the time, I'm not upset about it or anything. Like they're still trying to figure it out, and they've put on some really good stuff. Matter of fact, this past week's Ring of Honor and that featured a match between Jay Lethal and Tracy Williams that is awesome. I highly recommend people go out of their way and check that match out. The whole show is not as good as that match, so I do want to give that disclaimer. So
skip around or just find the match if you can.
Yeah, you can go ahead and fast forward through the first half of that episode if you like. But yeah, the Tracy Williams Jay Lethal match was really good, and I expect that the Tracy Williams Jonathan Gresham match is going to be awesome as well. So, but yeah, I think the other thing that they're kind of dealing with right now that's not super helpful is because of COVID, they can't get a lot of their international talent in, and Ring of Honor has really kind of, I don't want to say prided themselves on it, but they've really kind of built a really diverse roster with guys from all over. Like you mentioned earlier, Marty Scurll. Granted, he's not likely coming back, but they've got other guys from the UK like Mark Haskins, and they've got Slex from Australia. They've got guys from Canada like PCO, and then all of their champions right now. Their world champion is Roosh, who is a Mexican wrestler. Dragon Lee is also Mexican. He is their current TV champion. They've got 6-man champions who are all Mexican. Bandito, I can't remember the other two. Flamita and Ray Oris. Although I think Ray Oris is from the U.S., but he's not going to defend the title by himself or anything. So, yeah. So all of those guys are not allowed in the country right now, so that sort of limits their ability to put on a very full show. And I think, especially like within the last couple of years, with like the debut of AEW, that they took a lot of the New Japan connection that ROH had, and for a lot of years here recently, New Japan and their connection with Ring of Honor was one of the big drawing points for Ring of Honor, because they were bringing in the Bullet Club guys. And, you know, as soon as AEW started off and they started kind of pulling a lot of that talent away, it really felt like their ROH roster was stale. It was like literally the Briscoes again, and it's just Briscoes country. And I like the Briscoes; they're fine, but I've never loved the Briscoes.
No,
So
they're good in a pinch and they're mainstays, but
yeah, and I think Tim and I both alluded to this on maybe the first episode of the podcast. We're only about 9 deep right now, but because we started at the beginning of the pandemic, so that's at the beginning of the new post. I don't want to say post pandemic, but the episodes that were taped during the pandemic.
yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, the fact that they lost all of these people, and it looked a lot more stale, because again they were really kind of left with Jay Lethal and the Briscoes, who they've been around forever in ROH, right? So, you know, I think that they kind of had to task themselves with rebuilding, and I think they're doing a pretty good job of it right now. They're also kind of heavily relying now on CMLL talents like Roosh and Dragon Lee and Bandito. And unfortunately, in this instance, the pandemic has sort of forced their hand in the same way that Bullet Club having to unceremoniously leave affected them as well. And then we've got, you know, Marty Scurll, who was at the top of the roster, and his situation.
Just to segue, so people know what we're talking about, and you know, just based on everything else, we won't go as in depth as maybe I thought we would earlier. But the reason we're talking about Marty like this is back in June there was a speak out movement. A lot of ladies and, you know, some gentlemen who have been involved in wrestling were speaking out against people who either were abusing their power physically and verbally, a little bit sexually. You know, a lot of allegations, and Marty was somebody listed in that movement out on Twitter that happened. So since then he has been removed from, because he was was he the head writer, head booker for as well?
I don't know if he was the head, but he was definitely on the booking team and had a lot of sway.
Because Delirious was still, I think,
So there were reports like at some point last year that Marty Scurll was the head booker, but I believe the booking team is primarily, or at that point was, I don't know if there were others, but I know Bully Ray, Delirious, and Marty towards the end of the year were the booking team. And I think that they were trying to kind of push the narrative, and this is just my speculation, they were trying to push the narrative that Marty had a bigger influence than maybe he actually did, to sort of maybe kind of have people think that Marty Scurll's influence was going to propel them in a different direction, even though I think it was a whole team decision. But that's just me speculating. I have no real insight into that.
Sure. I understand that. Do you think, I mean, in terms of, I don't know that he was like a huge draw per se, but he was a known quantity. Everyone assumed like before he signed with ROH that he was going to go to AEW with the rest of the Bullet Club guys.
I think so. I think he was a fairly big. He may have at the time have been one of the top 3 draws in ROH. So I mean, it's definitely a big hit, him not being allowed back effectively. So. And again, I don't know what the situation is specifically with Marty Scurll on that front. All I have heard is that ROH does not plan on using him going forward. So I assume that is not pandemic specific.
No, that may be allegation specific or pending. I don't know. I mean, if he's free and out there, I mean, if he did horrible things, you're not going to let the guy around. If it's to a lesser degree, I hate saying to a lesser degree, I sound like a moron, but if things are found in his favor, maybe that's a better way to phrase it. I could see. I feel like AEW would be the most forgiving because there was also I don't know why I can't think of his name.
I know I'm picturing him, but I can't think of the name either off the top of my head.
He's in Jericho's group.
Yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about. I just don't know his name right now.
This happens to be frequently. He's a good wrestler, and he's sharp on the mic.
Yeah.
And, he had some allegations and things, and I think went to some kind of sensitivity training, some kind of slap on the wrist, and came right back. I cannot think of his name, and it's going to just aggravate.
I know.
All right, so we found out the guy's name, the guy, Sammy Guevara. Yeah, he was also kind of in this slap on the wrist. So I mean, I could see them taking a chance on Marty just because they know him, he's their buddy, and he's a bit of a draw. But kind of going back, I know there's some people to look out for. Just condensing it down, just to pick. Who are the top 3 people, and I don't mean like a Jay Lethal or a Mark or Jay Briscoe, who are like the top 3 people that you think most people, should watch, should see to tune into ROH, and like, these guys are going to be the future, or maybe be the next somebody that WWE or AEW or Impact, TNA, Globe Life, whatever I don't know, Owl Company pick up.
Yeah. So I guess the first 2 that spring to mind are actually going to be in the main event of the TV this coming week, which would be Jonathan Gresham and Tracy Williams. So Tracy Williams is a guy who I've worked with all 3 of the guys that I'm about to mention, so I'm not really trying to be a Mark name dropping guy, but
no bias either. No bias.
No, I'm not being biased, other than the fact, like, honestly. Before the tournament started, I was actually thinking to myself, you know what? I really like Tracy Williams. Like, he sounds technically, but he's something about him. He doesn't really work for me. But now, after having seen that match with him and Jay Lethal last week, I am a legit Tracy Williams fan, which is weird because I didn't think that was going to be something I'd be saying, like a month into the tournament. He's really sound. His personality and everything, he's come a long way as far as the total package, and I think he's got a really bright future. He's been around for a while, so I mean, and all the guys actually I'm about to bring up have been around for a while, but yeah, Tracy Williams is a really, really solid wrestler, and I think he'll be around for quite a while. I think he could even just as easily be a megastar somewhere in like a Japan or anywhere else in the world. Another guy that I mentioned there, Jonathan Gresham, who is also in the finals of this tournament. I don't know that he is going to ever become a megastar, and part of the reason for that is he is only like 5'6". He is and I think I still might be giving him 2 extra inches because, like, we looked it up the other week on the podcast, but I don't have any of my notes in front of me. So, but yeah, he's like 5'4", 5'6", something like that. You know, not somebody that immediately jumps to mind as somebody that would be on the WWE's radar. Maybe he could do something in AEW, but he is one of the best technical wrestlers in the world, and he's just fantastic. He's got the total package. He can talk. He's got a lot of athleticism. He's been doing it a really long time too, though. Tracy Williams has been doing it for probably a good 10 years plus. Jonathan Gresham has been around for at least 15.
Oh, wow.
And then the third guy that I was going to bring up is Fred Yehai. So he is somebody that Ring of Honor signed before the pandemic actually started. They signed him because they had announced the Pure Title tournament before they had gone on break. So they were going to do the Pure Title tournament, and they had announced all the people that were going to be in the Pure Title tournament, and then they couldn't do the tournament. So Fred Yehai, they had actually signed to a contract, and he was supposed to be in the tournament, and then they kind of had to delay everything. But yeah, Yehai is awesome. He's really, really good. He is not. I think he might have been in less than or around the same time as Tracy Williams. I don't think he's got maybe, but about 7 or 8 years. But yeah, he's really good. I like him a lot. I think the sky's the limit for him. But those are the 3 names that I would definitely say are going to be the reasons to watch Ring of Honor right now, for sure.
That's good to know their future's in some good hands.
Yeah, and they've also got really good guys on the roster to begin with. Like, I mean, you mentioned Matt Sydal. He's been in and out a little bit. I don't know exactly what his situation is. I think he's an independent contractor right now because he's done some stuff.
I think he just got picked up by AEW, in all honesty.
I don't think he's officially on the roster, but he may be, unless that is something that changed.
I could be off base. I think
he's definitely there, but I don't know if he's like a permanent member of the roster. Another guy to keep in mind, though, is Jeff Cobb. Jeff Cobb is awesome. He is maybe he's not at the top of my mind because he was not in the Pure Title tournament, but he is one of my favorite guys to watch right now in ROH, for sure.
AEW, I think, was going to try and sign him before COVID kind of shut everything down, too.
Yeah. Well, I believe he is based in Hawaii, which not exactly a wrestling hotbed. But, yeah, so I don't know if travel has been an issue for him, and that's why he hasn't shown up anywhere else. But I know towards the end of the year and the beginning of this year, ROH was working with him pretty regularly. And, you know, again, like I said, Jeff Cobb is amazing. He's the future. I'm not kidding. If anybody,
I'm familiar with him. He's a talented guy.
Yeah, if anybody from Ring of Honor right now was to become a superstar in WWE like Keith Lee has, Jeff Cobb, 100%. I think it's going to be him. But I also really like Roosh. I mean, Dragon Lee is great. Bandito and Flamita both are great. Bandito in particular, I think, is my favorite of all of the CMLL talents they've brought in. But yeah, I mean, they've got a lot of really good guys. Again, unfortunately, they can't use all of them right now. But and then if you're just looking for some weird shit, there's another guy who's been working for ROH recently, or was up until the pandemic hit, named Danhausen, who
I know Danhausen. He's on Twitter constantly. People love
Danhausen is my dude. I also worked with him a little bit in Nova Pro, and they didn't really run with him, but they also used him before he kind of turned into whatever tooth demon he has become.
That's definitely, he stands out though. That's good for him in the long term because he's unique.
He is. He's
the understatement of the year, but he's unique.
He's he, along with a couple other guys on the indies right now, are doing great jobs of just putting themselves over on social media. And, Danhausen is a genuinely nice, good, very nice, very evil guy. And yeah, Tim, who I do the podcast with, hates him. He thinks he's an idiot. But different strokes for different folks, right?
Absolutely. And you guys have some good insight. The podcast Honor Bound is on Buzzsprout, right?
It's on Buzzsprout, but you can download it everywhere. We're listed in iTunes, Spotify, Google, all of the stuff. So
you can find Kevin and Honor Bound and Tim everywhere. We could do this forever because I know we really, really can. But I want to close out with I know we span the gamut, but is there anything we didn't touch on that you want to get out there real quick?
Real quick is really the qualifier here. So I'm going to go ahead and say maybe we do a part 2 down the road or something. When you came to me originally for this, I was like, oh, dude, we're going to talk for 3 hours. It's definitely going to happen. And we've made it halfway. So there's got to be a part 2, right?
No, we can go. I as always, my wife, there's familial ties, his cousin.
Oh yeah. We didn't bring that up, did we?
We did not bring that up once. So just all the nepotisms. No, she's a good sport, but she's upstairs chilling dutifully while we do this. So yeah, we can absolutely talk forever, and I would imagine a part 2 will be in the near future because I enjoyed the hell out of this, man.
Awesome. I'm glad. I felt like I know you were interviewing me, but I felt like I was talking entirely too much. I'm not comfortable with it.
You were a natural. Kevin Burr, sir. Kevin, thank you so much for stopping on Point of Jew.
Yep, thanks for having me.
We'll get you another time. And listen to Honor Bound. Get your wrestling fix, your Ring of Honor information. I personally will I'll try and catch some of those matches you were talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Be up to date because – hey, ROH got me into wrestling, got you into wrestling. So little bit of a space in my heart for him always.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for stopping in, man.
Bye. Thanks.
All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did. I think I delivered on my earlier premonition of we're going to probably talk for like 6 hours. But I really enjoyed talking to Kevin about wrestling and just obviously some shared experiences and some people that we both know coming from industry, as weird and close as the professional wrestling community and industry is. Other guests, upcoming, I work all the time to try and get people on the show. Right now it's absolutely mostly people I know, but I really want to talk baseball. So I reached out to, like Trevor Bauer and Marcus Stroman because they're upcoming MLB free agents. And Marcus Stroman did say he would consider coming on the podcast. I have no idea if that's a thing that's going to happen. I think I posted a screenshot of he and I with the one exchange on Twitter. I'm not going to blow it up to be something like, oh, we had an hour-long conversation because that's not a thing that happened. But, having more guests upcoming. I know we got another gaming guest coming up. We have a YouTube series guest coming up who does like really cool 3D printing and engineering stuff. Another musician or two that I'm trying to work on. If there's anybody that, you guys want to come on the show, or if you do something that, you want to talk about and that fits the parameters of pop culture entertainment stuff, hit me up, facebook.com/pointofjew. On Twitter at THEJHirsch, THEJHirsch42, and comment on the YouTube video, whatever it is. I'm always happy to talk. I'm always happy to figure out if there's something that works there. As my brain blanks out, the best place to just kind of hit me up on any platform is Linktr.ee/THEJHirsch. That's my Linktree. That'll put you in contact with me on like any single thing that I'm on. I throw all the links up there. It's a good place to store everything. I thank Tommy Siegel for that suggestion. Their closing thoughts. Big shout out to Jerome Brooks for winning the Baby Yoda giveaway that we were doing. And like I said, we'll give more stuff away. I'm definitely about giving back. Forcing's the wrong word, but encouraging you guys to listen and like on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube. Small things, but it makes me feel good. To see that you guys are interacting back or enjoying the randomness that I do and bring. Also, just based on this podcast, shout out to Jimmy Yang for training me in professional wrestling, and Cody Hawk. You guys were phenomenal. I doubt either one probably remembers me very much anymore. And same to John Moxley. Probably would not recognize me if they saw me on the street, but you guys were really, really, really cool to me when I was in wrestling. So I tremendously appreciate that. Shout out to Paul London for having, given me a weird story to tell. He seemed like a cool guy. And then just shout out to the random people I've been harassing on Twitter and Instagram to try and come on the show. I'm reaching for the stars, and that's probably not going to end well, but you shoot your shot, right? You see what you can do. If I can grab the odd end celebrity, athlete, actor, musician, whoever, cool. If not, I'm super happy having the conversations with my friends and promoting, their endeavors, whether it's music, comics and books, performances, whatever it is that they do. I really love, that's why I do this. I love having these conversations and just learning about stuff and having my opinion or thoughts and being able to express them to somebody that, is a subject matter expert. Cause what do I know? But I really enjoyed this past podcast. This one was probably for me more so than anything else, just to be able to share these stories and talk wrestling. And hopefully you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. And like I said, any suggestions or people or anybody or any comments you want to make just about me, about the show. I said last week, if you want to tell me I suck, that's not going to be super constructive. I know that already. It's something that's not going to get worked on. But hopefully you guys keep tuning in and enjoying this. We're on Facebook, on iTunes and Spotify and Google Podcasts. And if I could, have a skywriter to transcribe the whole show, I would. That is not financially responsible of me to do that, or carrier pigeons or smoke signals. Believe me, I look into it all. But, keep tuning in. Hopefully I keep having really awesome guests that you guys enjoy. And, we'll keep doing this. Thank you guys so much for the support that you do give me. We're a bit early on this because I know we're in November now, so Thanksgiving's right around the corner. So I am thankful for the time that we spend together. That was, I don't know, very Mr. Rogers-esque, not in a good way at all. But we'll do this again next week. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys.